firework displays are instigated by committees or by small groups of people whose job it is to organise the event. And that's what this film is all about, showing you how to set up a firework display so that everyone can celebrate safely and have a marvellous evening. And I think the most important thing to remember is to select one person who is going to have overall responsibility for supervising the event. Then the first thing you need to do is to contact the manufacturers or the specialist suppliers of display fireworks. They, incidentally, will be only too happy to provide you with expert advice. Now, there's also a leaflet produced by the Department of Trade and Industry, which has good advice on organising a firework display. Your supplier will provide you with a copy. In fact, they may have provided you with one already.
One thing the committee will have to decide at an early stage is the type of fireworks they wish to use. This will depend to a large extent on the site they've chosen. For instance, a flat, level site would benefit from an aerial display, so that the spectators have the best view. A sloping site, on the other hand, could use more ground fireworks. There are a number of things to consider in choosing a suitable site. How close are any buildings? What about overhanging trees, car parks, greenhouses, and farm animals? And you must consider the effects of noise on patients in hospitals and on elderly people. So, the first thing to decide on is the site. Take into account that the spectators should be placed with their backs to the prevailing wind. Give yourselves plenty of room, an area about the size of a football pitch. Half for the spectators and half for the fireworks, which need at least 60 metres by 40 metres, plus an area for fallout. Fence it off to keep the spectators well back, at least 30 metres from the nearest firework. Not only is this safer, but the spectators will also have a better view. This site is ideal. Those trees will make a perfect backdrop to the display, and by using this end of the field, the display will be well away from those houses and the church. The gate over there will make a good entrance for car parking, and that section will be roped off for the audience. The bonfire should be well away and downwind from the audience and the fireworks. If you're expecting large numbers of spectators, provision should be made for catering tents and the Red Cross or the St. John's Ambulance Brigade. You'll need to write to a number of people. The fire brigade, the police, you may want their help with traffic control, first aid organisations who are only too happy to attend. If your display is near the sea, the coast guards, and then there are the courtesy letters to local farmers, animal sanctuaries, local residents, especially the elderly, and any nearby hospital. Choose the fireworks which best suit the site. Don't stretch the display out. If the pack you have is for a 20-minute display, don't try and make it last 30. Keep it short and sharp for maximum effect. Having ordered the fireworks in good time, when they arrive they must be stored somewhere secure and dry. This garage is suitable. It's brick-built and it's lockable. Now is the time to read the instructions on each firework and make sure you understand them. Draw up a firing plan with rockets and shells at the rear of the site, Roman candles in the center, and the static pieces towards the front, with more than 30 meters between the spectators and the nearest firework. Make a list of the things you'll need to set up the display. It should include a spade, a sledgehammer and a claw hammer, some nails, a sharp knife or a pair of heavy-duty scissors, a good strong pair of pliers, some baling wire, strong adhesive tape, and matches. You'll need a battery and wire strippers for electrical ignition, and don't forget a torch, because it'll be dark on the night of the display and you'll need to see what you're doing. The instructions supplied with the fireworks will tell you how many wooden posts and stakes will be needed for setting up the display.
Now, on the night, you and your firing team are going to need protective clothing. You need a set of overalls like this. Not a synthetic material, it's going to be too inflammable, something like cotton, and make sure that it's zipped right up to the top because you might otherwise get sparks down the front. You need some eye protectors like these and a cap to stop sparks getting in your hair, or I think ideally a helmet like that because what goes up must come down, and it might land on your head. You may also like to wear gloves. Now, whatever fireworks you have, they're going to come into one of 5 main categories. They may come in different brand names, but you're going to get Roman candles like those, set pieces, something like that, assortments of rockets, different types there, shells come in different shapes and sizes, and mines. And any firework that you have is going to fall into one of those categories. Let's just talk to start with a little about lighting fireworks in general. Now, they're going to have a lighting point, which is basically going to be one of 2 types. This has got a protective cover on it. Let me pull that off. It's either going to have a lighting point with a delay fuse, which enables you to get out of the way before the firework ignites, like that one, or it's going to have the conventional type of touch paper, which acts as a delay in itself. Always light the fireworks with one of these things, which is called a port fire. Now, this is really just a slow burning firework which is specially designed to light other fireworks. It must always be held at arm's length and ideally attached to a stick like I've got here, and turn your head away from the firework when you're lighting it. That's just basic safety. Well, now, let's go through the setting up and the lighting of each of these categories of fireworks. Now, I'm going to light some of them, but obviously, middle of the day, you're not going to see much of the effect. So at the end of this little sequence, we'll show you some nighttime shots, which will show you each of the categories to their real effect. Let's start anyway with Roman candles. Now, these basically take the form of a tube which ejects a series of stars into the air at frequent intervals, separated by a few seconds. And they come in a variety of different forms. You can either get them as single candles, like that, or as a battery of candles in a canister, all lit by the same fuse. Or you can have a bouquet arrangement like that, which is fixed to stakes, or a different sort of bouquet like this one, which is actually jammed into the earth on its own stake. Now, they must be upright, that's very important, and also the stakes must be driven firmly into the ground, or if you've got a canister which is embedded in the soil, that must be firmly embedded. Small point, tie the firework to the back of the stake, not the front of it, so that if by any chance the bindings come loose, the firework will tip away from the audience, not towards them. Otherwise they might be seeing more sorts of stars than one. They're lit either by a conventional delayed fuse like that, that's still got its cover on, or electrically. Okay, let's move on to set pieces. Now, these are made up of a number of fireworks fixed to a frame. You'll get instructions with the set piece, but essentially what happens is that the frame is fixed to a tall pole, and the pole is fixed to a stake driven into the ground, into the back of the stake, of course. You need to use long poles because these displays, of course, are going to go at the front, but the audience needs to be able to see them. Now, 1 or 2 things to remember when you're fixing these up. If you've got any rotating parts like these, make sure that they can rotate freely, and also make sure that the lighter is well strapped down so that it can't foul any moving parts. It's also worth remembering when you're strapping this down to put it somewhere where the person who's lighting the firework in the dark can find it. And of course, if these are electrically fired, then read the special instructions that go with them. Now, everyone knows what a rocket looks like, but bear in mind the ones you're going to use in your display will probably be considerably more powerful than the ones you'd normally buy in the shops. So treat them with particular respect. And also bear in mind that not all sites are suitable for rockets, so it's worth following the old maxim, when in doubt, leave it out. Rockets will either come with the rocket casing attached to the stick or separately like this, in which case you'll need to ram the stick into the retaining hole, and if you're in any doubt about whether it's loose in that hole, put a daub of glue onto the end of the stick before you ram it home. Put that one in there. Now, rockets either come singly, so that they're fired from a launcher, or they're put into a frame in a group and fired from the frame. But either way, either the launcher or the frame must be driven very firmly into the ground, and it's also important to angle it away from where your spectators are going to be, because the spent cases need to land in the fallout area, not on top of your spectators. Bear in mind the old saying, what goes up must come down, and in this case about 80% of what goes up comes down again. It's also worth remembering that rockets track into the wind, so if there's a fair breeze blowing, you want to angle your frame or your launcher accordingly. In fact, it's just as well to send up a test firing before the spectators arrive so that you can see where the spent cases come down. Now, before you fire any rockets, make sure that they're free to lift off from the frame or from the launcher. Then when you're ready, remove the cover from the fuse, make sure that the fuse is straight, and at this stage I need to get my glasses and helmet on. Pick up the port fire, and at arm's length, remember, light the tip of the fuse or the touch paper, and stand well back. Shells are the most spectacular part of the firework display. They're also the most powerful, so they need to be treated with respect. Very important to read the instructions carefully, particularly where they deal with shell size in relation to mortar tube size. They come either sealed into mortar tubes, like this, or as sets of shells with a separate mortar tube. Now, this is a shell. They can be cylindrical, they can be round, they can be covered in paper like this one, or covered in plastic. But the principle is still the same. There's a main compartment here which holds the stars, and there's a charge here which blasts the shell out of the mortar tube. There's the fuse at the top. If the shell is sealed into the tube, then it either comes with the fuse coming out from the side of the tube, or in this case, it's under the lid at the top. But in any case, the principle of lighting is exactly the same. Let's look at how the tubes are fixed in the ground. Now, you can either bed them into the ground like this, and they're bedded into about 2/3 of their length, covered in plastic bag because they're made of cardboard, and if the ground is anything like damp, then the cardboard can go soggy. There's usually a mark on the tube to show you how far to bury it. Or, and I think this is a better idea, embed them in a dustbin or an oil drum which is full of sand or earth. Embedded into the same distance, but the advantage of this is that the person who's lighting it doesn't have to bend down so low. One thing that is vitally important is that you never ever position any part of your body over the mortar tube. Doesn't matter whether you're lighting a shell or not. Remember, it's at night, there's a lot going on, there could be a shell in there and it could go off suddenly, so that would be very dangerous. Right, let's load the tube. Now, the first most important thing to remember is that you must have the right sized shell for the tube. This is a 4-inch tube, this is a 3-inch shell. Put that in there and it waggles about. Now, if I lit that, the effect would be that it would burst either very close to the ground or on the ground. And remember, you're the nearest person to it, so beware. This is a 4-inch shell, fits in there nice and snug. Drop it right down to the bottom of the tube, leave the fuse over the edge, take the cover off, and you're now ready to light. Right, I've now put my helmet and my goggles on. Remember, hold the port fire at arm's length and step back. Take a few seconds before that goes. Once the shell's left the tube, and make sure that it has, there was certainly no doubt on that occasion, just have a good poke round in the tube to make sure there's no pieces of smouldering debris left over in there. And the best thing to use is a stick with a nail in the end. That looks fairly clean. Okay, we're ready to reload. Box, very important, upwind of the fireworks, well away from them, away from sparks from the bonfire, with a lid on it at all times. Take the new shell out, put the lid back on again. In it goes. Use the other mortar tube this time. Fuse hanging over. As the fuse lit, out I go. Well, the last category is mines. Now they either come ready to fire, complete with a fuse at the top, or rather like the shells, they come individually with a separate mortar tube. The main difference between the shells and the mines is that the mines blow the stars straight out of the mortar tube. Now, the tube needs to be planted in the ground in a similar way to the shells. It needs to be buried 2/3 of its depth, either in the soil or in a dustbin, or if the instructions say so, the mine can be strapped to a stake. But make sure, in exactly the same way as with the shells, that the tube is angled away from the spectators. When you want to light the mine, very similar procedure. Take the cover off, just draw the fuse out and straighten it, and holding the port fire at arm's length, step back. Well, now there we are. We've seen how to set up and light each category of firework. Now let's see what they look like going off in the dark, starting with Roman candles. The stars shoot out in rapid succession and they can reach heights of over 100 feet. Now here are some examples of set pieces. There go some rockets. Now those noisy ones are the shells going off. And these are the mines. Well, now that's what your fireworks are going to look like on the night. But before you ever get to the evening, there are one or two other points that you need to consider to make sure that the evening is not only a success, but it's also safe. You need to get your team well organized. You need somebody on the gate to make sure that nobody brings in fireworks of their own. You then, I think, need somebody who is actually going to supervise the spectators coming onto the ground. Whatever happens, never ever let them round the back of the firing area. And I think it's just as well to light the spectator area, certainly at the beginning, so that people can see where they're going. You then need to get your own firing team organized. Now, I would suggest that you have one or maybe two people who are concerned with lighting the Roman candles and the set pieces. You need somebody else to light your aerial displays, rockets, shells and mines. And you'll maybe need one or two people who are actually loading those rockets and shells and mines for you. I think as a general principle, keep the numbers down to a minimum. You're going to be in the dark, and otherwise you're going to have people stumbling over each other. Now, there is one other very important point, and that is what to do with fireworks which don't go off. Whatever happens, don't go and inspect them. Don't peer over them. Leave them well alone, and when everybody's gone away, immerse them in water overnight, and then the following day, bury them in the ground. Most important. Now, the Department of Trade and Industry leaflet, which I mentioned to you earlier, has in fact on the back of it 10 very good points. Let me just go through them. 1. Light fireworks at arm's length. 2. Never smoke while handling fireworks. 3. Not to have more than 3 or 4 people lighting fireworks. Not to fire rockets or other aerial fireworks over the heads of spectators. Don't allow people to bring their own fireworks. Don't touch a dud firework for at least half an hour and then hold it well away from your face. Never use petrol or paraffin to light the bonfire. Don't let children collect spent firework cases when the display is finished. Don't let anybody into the firing display area, either before or after the display, except those people responsible for lighting the fireworks. And 10, make certain that the bonfire is put out completely and the litter bins are emptied. Now, if you follow those 10 points, as well as following all the various points about setting up and lighting the fireworks that we've been through, then you're going to have a great success and you're also going to be able to celebrate safely.